Hey everyone, Shane here with etrailer.com. Today I have a 2020 F-150 hauling a 2023 East West Alta travel trailer, and I'm going to walk through how to install the B&W Continuum weight distribution. So if you've never had weight distribution or never used it before, what weight distribution is designed to do is take the weight off the back of the truck and put it back onto the trailer axles. If you don't have weight distribution, you have all that weight on the back of your truck, especially on a double axle trailer. What it does, it puts all that pressure on one axle in the trailer, and that's where your sway comes into play. When you get sway, it moves the back of the truck back and forth. It makes it unsafe driving conditions. Weight distribution is going to get your truck back to normal ride height, get your trailer back level, and it's going to help resist any of that sway you may get otherwise. Hey everyone, I have Michael here, the owner of this setup. And we're going to ask him a few questions about his previous weight distribution and why he chose the Continuum. Michael, can you tell us why, or the previous setup you had and some of the issues you had with it?
Yeah, well, it was a more traditional type with the spring bars. Mm-hmm. There was a porpoising, slight sway. It was rated properly, and we dialed it in well. Ran across the scales. I don't think we could have dialed it in any better, but there was still just, I didn't have the full comfort feeling on this that I did on the previous travel trailer that we had and the previous weight distribution. So I knew what could be, and I was 90% there, but I just wasn't quite there. And so we wanted to look for something different. Mm-hmm. We also didn't like the inability to be able to back up without disconnecting. That was a bit of a hassle.
So you mentioned having to take the spring bars off.
Yeah, so you can back up with the spring bars on. I know it's not recommended to, but you can if you're just going to do a slight turn and you're mostly backing up straight. But if you've got to do a blind side backing and really get the cranking on the steering wheel, you got to take the spring bars off before you can maneuver in. And in the research that I did, this does not require that. So that's a nice convenience, especially if you go to pull off of the interstate to go in and get fuel and you get yourself stuck and you need to back up to maneuver out. Especially when you're in traffic. I just thought that was a really great feature to not have to worry about jumping out, disconnecting. Otherwise, if you try to do so, maybe damaging something.
Mm-hmm. So I understand spring bars make a lot of noise.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that was one thing. The first time we backed up with the spring bars on, and my wife thought I had run into something, I was dragging something. She didn't realize that the loud screeching noise was just part of it. And then now it just irritates her every time we go to turn, and she rolls the windows up and can't you do something about that?
So that happens every time, right?
Well, on the setup that I had, yeah, that was pretty much an every time. Just going through a parking lot, getting off the interstate, going in through the travel plaza to get fuel. It's just that screech and that creech. Yeah, it's rather annoying. It's part of the system and it's an annoyance, but it's just with this. Apparently that's not going to be a thing. So that's a nice added bonus feature.
So, since you mentioned this, why did you pick the Continuum?
Well, like I said, we dialed everything in on the other, and it was all the numbers matched, but it's still the trailer just didn't feel the way that I had been able to get my previous travel trailer set up. There was still just a little bit of a wiggle. There was still just a little bit of porpoising on there. And in order to be able to adjust that more, that requires getting the wrenches out, disassembling, mm-hmm. changing positions, tightening everything back down, and trying again with the Continuum. As the loads shift from trip to trip, a weekend's going to be different than a 2-week trip. As you have things in the bed of the truck or more or less in the trailer, you've got the dynamic adjustments of the hydraulic system.
Right.
And I just like that feature of the more dynamic adjustment without having to get wrenches and tools out. It just seems like such a better setup. The travel's different. On this one, we're traveling with half a tank of water. On another trip, we have no water at all. So now the balance is completely shifted. You just use the pump.
Makes it a little bit easier. Mm-hmm. A little bit easier just to get out while you're on the fly and adjust that pressure.
That's what's appealing to me. That was the big motivation for going to this.
Have you tested this out yet?
No, not yet.
Well, we're about to. Let's go take it for a ride.
All
See
right.
what you think between the two of them.
Okay.
All right.
Let's go. Well, I'm at 63 now. That I'm going to be able to do 63, 65 with a windy day like this. You know the trailer's back there. You know you're towing something, but this is better than what the other system was, and we've got the wind that we didn't have. I mean, you know the trailer's back there. It's 28 foot and it's 11 foot tall. But yeah, this is tremendously better than what the other weight distribution hitch was.
So I noticed that with mine, no matter what weight distribution system you put on, because you're on the ball mount and the backest part of the vehicle, you're never going to get rid of everything. You're always going to feel something. But if we can minimize it as much as possible by the system that we use, the better our ride's going to be.
Yeah, and you know, I think I've got a little bit spoiled by the last travel trailer that we had. Well, this is a nice travel trailer, better than the more room and better travel trailer. But I kind of got spoiled in the driving because it was shorter, and it was just so much easier to handle that I kind of got a bit spoiled by how nice the thing rode in comparison.
Yeah, the bigger the trailer, the more weight you got. The more
And
weight you got.
the more wind that you capture,
Yeah.
which today being a windy day is out there. So, but this is very manageable. 65. You know the trailer's back there, but it's very manageable. I do think I'm going to need to increase the tongue weight.
So you're going to lower the pressure on the...
I want to try to. We'll get up here, and as we go to make the turn, I think I would like to increase the tongue weight on this
the trailer?
and
Okay.
see what that does on the return. With this being one of the features about this system that I like, let's see if we can dial it in dynamic. So as we go to make a U-turn up here, we'll see if we can change that a little bit, and then do a comparison as we go back down the opposite direction.
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll turn that needle valve out and just lower the pressure that's in there
Okay,
down from where it is.
and that'll increase the tongue weight.
That'll increase the tongue weight.
Let's see what kind of reaction we get from that.
So we'll go down, so 6. We're about 750 now. You want to go down more than that?
No, I think let's try that.
So we just stopped and adjusted the pressure a little bit, kind of fine tuning for the way for the way you want to travel with it. Kind of.
Yeah, I want to see if a little heavier tongue weight will help.
Feel anything different yet?
Well, I'm still trying to process things, but I do think that a little heavier tongue weight had an effect. It's difficult with the wind today, and the traffic's not letting me get to the speed that I really want to get to.
The good thing about the wind is how effective this weight control is of the system.
True.
You know, you have your brake controller right there, and I haven't seen you touch it once.
No, I
So-
haven't had to.
Haven't needed to.
Okay, so with traffic, we're keeping steady at 63. I kind of wanted to get 65 a little bit more, but I don't want to get into the left-hand lane and go around the traffic or block up what's coming behind. But yeah, I think that little heavier tongue weight on there dialed it in just a little bit better.
We're back. We just did about a 20-mile trip, and I want to ask Michael, what'd you think?
I like it.
You like it? A little bit different?
It is. It's different. We went up north on 61, and then made a U-turn and was able to pull over to the side and adjust the pressure, which shifted the tongue weight and was able to make that dynamic adjustment. We were in and out of the truck in less than a minute, less than 2 minutes. Able to then go ahead and make that adjustment and get right back out on the road. And the heavier tongue weight, I think, helped a little bit on there.
Yeah. So making that adjustment on the fly makes it really easy.
I like that.
Yeah.
That was one of the features that drew me to this, and we put that to use on the test drive. And I think it's a fantastic feature.
So you decided to go through some little city streets.
Yeah, went down Pittman and through there.
To try to get some tighter turns, a little slower speed, tighter turns to see how the system reacts.
Yeah, kind of see what to expect when you go through those tourist towns and you're having to navigate where there's going to be heavier traffic. Places like Estes Park, Colorado, trying to go through those. It was fantastic. No screeching of the metal on metal. The ability to make a turn tighter than what I would have otherwise been able to make using the spring bars. That was fantastic. This was able to be done just as easily as if it was a utility trailer.
Excellent. Now there's a few different types of weight distribution setups. The most common ones are going to be your chains or your spring bars. Spring bars, they work. However, there's a bar that goes across the back of your outside of your frame rail and hooks to a bracket on the side. The biggest complaint with those is, one, you have to take the spring bar off and on anytime you uncouple. Two, when it rubs against that L bracket, for your sway control, it makes a loud sound. That sound is very loud. It sounds like your vehicle's falling apart. It is part of the system, but it does. And it gets annoying to some people. The chains, don't get me wrong, I love the chains. They work great. There's a pulley on the side. You got to have the tool. You hook the chain onto it, and you got to turn that to pop that chain over the top. With this system, you don't have to have any tools. All you need is your jack. Raise your jack, you pop it onto the ball mount, set your pressure on your pump, and you're basically set up and ready to go. So this is what our Continuum looks like when it's installed. You can see it's completely different than your typical weight distribution setup. These are going to be your spring bars rather than having them along the side. There's no disconnection here. This all stays as one piece. When you disconnect, you lower your jack, pull this little lever, it pops out, and it'll rest right here on this clamp, or on this bracket here. Let's go over some of the differences between the Continuum and the typical weight distribution that I mentioned earlier. As you can see, the Continuum is completely different setup than your typical weight distribution, whether it be the spring bars or the chain style. The disconnection on the other two, again, remove the spring bars, you got to pop the chains off. With this one, you have a little lever here. All you do is lower your jack, take the weight off of it, the pressure off the cylinder, pull this lever, and this whole thing will slide out. It makes setting up and disconnecting much easier than with your spring bar setups or your chain setups. Connecting the two is just as easy. Use your jack for the pressure, slide it in, lock it into place, you're basically ready to go. Other than that, all you're going to do is add pressure in the cylinder from the pump handle to the pressure that you need to get your truck and trailer to normal ride height. Another nice benefit that I really like about this system is the weight capacities. On a typical weight distribution setup, let's say with spring bars, you normally have a very small range of the tongue weight and the size trailer that you can pull. For instance, you may have a weight range of 400 to 600 pounds that spring bar can handle, or 400 to 800 pounds that spring bar can handle. If you get a trailer that, say you trade your trailer in, you get a new one, tongue weight's a little bit higher, that means you have to get new spring bars. With this system, it's going to work with trailers up to 1,600 pounds of tongue weight and a total trailer weight capacity of 16,000 pounds. So as long as you stay within that range, it's going to be able to handle pretty much any trailer that you pull. The name Continuum comes from the continuous onset of weight distribution. At all times, both bars are exerting the same amount of weight distribution, equally. With traditional style bars, like your spring bar, only one bar is going to handle the majority of the weight. Unlike any other system out there, this system is going to use hydraulic fluid and pressure to get you to the proper weight distribution that you need so that your trailer is level and that your truck is back to normal ride height. The pump here, it's a completely sealed pump, lifetime warranty, zero maintenance. You have a handle here that allows you to put the pressure in depending on the trailer that you're using and the tongue weight that you have. This is a release valve to release the pressure out of the cylinder. As far as our hydraulic lines are going to be DOT compliant. They're going to be the lines that you would typically see on like tractor trailers, hydraulic lines. They're going to hold up in all weather conditions, 0-degree weather, so you don't have to worry about them going bad. As I mentioned, no maintenance on the pump at all, no maintenance on the cylinder. The only maintenance for this whole system that you're going to have are going to be these two Zerk fittings right here on the coupler or on the head itself. You want to pump some grease in there about every time you change your oil. On our center section, we're going to have 3 different holes on this back side here. This is to allow you to adjust for pitch depending on your setup and to give you a little bit more ground clearance. Another nice thing about this system that makes it very easy to use is we can adjust while we're out on the road. We don't have to have any tools to do it. Once you have your system set up, if you feel like you're getting a little bit too much bounce, or maybe your tongue weight is a little bit too much, add a little bit more pressure. If you feel like when you're going, it's a little bit too stiff, you simply release a little bit of the pressure. You can do all that while you're traveling. Unlike other systems where you have to remove the spring bar, you have to find somewhere to store them. With this, you don't have to remove this section. Simply use your jack, take the pressure off, release it from the head. Take this, store it right on top of that bracket. It keeps it up off the ground, whether you're storing it for the winter or you're storing it until your next vacation time. As far as the installation process of this system, it's going to be far more easier than your typical spring bar or chain style. The only thing that's going to be required to install this is a small torque wrench, 9/16 socket and wrench, 3/4 inch socket and wrench. The small torque wrench, you're going to have a couple bolts here that get the torque down to a small amount. The bracket itself, and then this bracket right here. It's the only thing you have to torque on this. With your typical spring bar or chain style, typically you have 2 bolts right up here where the ball mount is. Very large bolts. They get torqued down typically to a few hundred pounds. The problem with that is, once you set it up for one trailer, it's basically set there. If you need to pull a different trailer that maybe sits a little bit higher, that means you have to undo those and re-torque them down. With this system, you have pins, so it makes adjusting the height of that ball much easier. The bracket that it's pinned to can actually be flipped over to raise that ball or lower it, depending on your trailer coupler height. Now that we've talked about how easy it is to get this installed, let me walk through how to get it done. Before we begin installing our new system, we need to remove our old one. So these L brackets here and these frame brackets, we're gonna have to remove those from the old system. The breakaway switch, we're gonna have to move to a different location because we're gonna have a bar for our new system that goes right across here and has some bolts that come down to clamp it to the frame rail. I don't know about this guy yet until we get this bar here put in place or bracket put in place. We may or may not have to move this up just a little bit. So get yourself set up before you start installing your new system. So I've got my old brackets off. I went ahead and removed the breakaway switch. I removed my tanks, just give me a little extra room. We may or may not have to remove this and move it back until we get our first bracket installed, but we can determine that here in just a second. We just need to make sure that we have 2.5 inches from here back for enough room. The reason I'm saying we may have to remove this, as I mentioned earlier, this guy right here. If I don't have to move it, I don't want to, because I don't want to put more holes in there than I need to. So if I can get it to fit here, right up against the tanks, or the tank mount, then I'm going to leave it where it is. You're going to take this bracket, it's going to have a pin on the bottom. Pay attention to how this pin is put in, because it's going to slide in all the way and only on one side. Doesn't matter which side you have it on, just when you go to put it all together, make sure you're putting the pin in the right place. And make sure if you have any wiring or anything like that in the way. You're not going to pinch anything. You're going to have a plate like this, long bolt. We'll have one on the inside, or one on the outside, one on the inside, on each side of this bracket. On the bottom, if you have a 5-inch frame rail, you're going to install them like this. If you have a 6-inch, you're going to install them like this. We have a 6-inch, so we're going to install them like this. I'll take this. Slide it up on the bottom of your frame rail like that. You have a flange nut for each bolt. So once you got your bracket in place, don't tighten anything down yet. I would double check. One, make sure you have 2.5 inches. We actually have 3 to the center. Also, set your propane tanks. Push this bracket as far back against this tray as possible if you didn't remove it. Set your propane tank on and make sure your propane tank sits flush before tightening these down, because you may have to move this back just a little bit. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to get our ball mount installed. We'll go ahead and slide it into our receiver. Go ahead and pin it with the included pin and clip. Then we need to level our trailer. Get your trailer leveled. We're going to measure from the ground to the top of the coupler. We're at about 21 1/4. We want our ball to be sitting 1 inch to 2 inches higher than that. So we may have to take this and flip it over and put it in the rise position. So I determined after measuring my ball height that we're not going to have to mess with the ball at all. We don't have to turn our receiver over, put it in the rise position. We're actually at just about 23 inches to the top of here. We were at 21 1/4 here. We want to be 1 to 2 inches higher on our ball. So we're right in the area where we need to be. So we're going to leave the ball the way it is, and we'll move on to the next step. Next, we're going to install our hydraulic pump mount bracket. It's going to look like this. You want this little curve thing here to be at the top. We're going to do it on our driver's side. You need to look inside the frame rail and see if there's any wiring, because manufacturers normally put wiring across this driver's side frame rail. We have wiring in loom here, but it looks pretty loose, so it's not going to interfere with our inside bracket. You'll also notice our battery tray brackets, they run like this. They're normally welded to the bottom of the frame rail. I think we can get it in right behind that. That'll give us enough room to get our back bracket in place, our bolts in place, and stay away from our propane tank cover. For 6-inch frame rails, which we have, we're going to use this second hole on this inside bracket. Install a flange nut. And we can install our lower bolt. We'll leave them loose for now. Once you determine the proper location for your bracket, again, not going to interfere with your cover. You want to give yourself about 4 inches behind your cover for the pump and for the handle. We're as far forward as we can go against our front battery tray mount, and we're still within our 4 inches or outside of our 4 inches, so we've got plenty of space. So now we'll take our 9/16 socket and wrench. We'll tighten the nuts down, and then we'll come back and we'll torque them to the specifications and the instructions. Again, you want to do the same thing we did on the lower brackets, or on the front brackets. We want to make sure we tighten the top and bottom equally, so our bracket sits flush against the frame rail and is not sitting at an angle. Now we can go ahead and get our pump installed. On the back side, there's going to be two holes. There's going to be two holes in your bracket, some short hex bolts. Take that line, go underneath. You're going to slide it in place like that. Line up the holes. Thread in your bolts. Slide here. For the handle. Once you get these on, come back, torque them to the specification and instructions as well. Now that we have our front bracket installed or loosely installed, we know it's going to fit correctly. We're going to take the nuts off the lower brackets. Remove our lower brackets. We're going to take our hydraulic cylinder. We need to mount it to that bracket. Pull it up through the top. Our pin is bigger on one side, so we need to make sure we're putting it in the right way. Once you get your pin in, we can put our clip on the other side to hold it in place. Once you have your cylinder on, go ahead and reinstall your lower brackets here, and then we'll tighten and torque them to the specifications and the instructions. So we've got our pump installed, we've got our front bracket reinstalled, we have our cylinder installed. Our main line going from our pump to our cylinder, there's going to be a vacuum line or a small airline tube that is connected to it with a zip tie. We need to disconnect it from our zip tie, we need to pull it up, and it's going to be connected to our pump. So you can use pliers, whatever you have to cut it. It's a small zip tie, just make sure you don't damage that line. And we're going to route this in such a way we can follow our main line and get it connected to our pump. Once you get your line right up to the top of your cylinder, you're going to see a port here. It's going to have a dummy plug in it. And make sure this line that's coming from your cylinder is cut flush. Don't have any burrs on it. We're going to take this dummy plug, pull in this blue ring, pull out on it. And we're going to take our new one and insert it in its place. When we do this, we want to make sure our line doesn't have any big kinks or anything like that in it. We're going to push it in. You can kind of feel it kind of pop a little bit. That means the teeth inside of there are grabbing onto it. Give it a little tug and make sure it's still in there. Breakaway switch. All I did was kind of put a little bend in this. I'm actually going to install it just like this. In your instructions, there's a couple of different ways to determine your tongue weight. One, you can take to a scale. Two, it's going to tell you when you go to put that center section on to couple the truck and the trailer. We're actually going to determine our ride height the old-fashioned way. So what we're going to do before we go to that part, nothing in our truck. This is completely unloaded, driving normal. We're going to measure from the ground, inside of our wheel well, or inside of our wheel, center of our wheel, bottom edge, we're at 39.5 inches for the back. We're going to do the same thing on the front. Once we couple, we hook up, we can raise our pressure, get this measurement back on the front and the back, and that'll tell us what pressure we need to be at to tow safely. Now that we know the measurements of our truck normal ride height, we'll go ahead and raise our trailer, couple it to the truck. So we'll take our center section, get all the weight onto the truck. This pin right here, we're going to pull it out of our center section. It's going to have 2 sleeves. Make sure you don't lose them because we're going to be putting them back in. We're going to raise our center section up. We're going to start with this middle hole. Slide it through like that. Slide your sleeve on the opposite side, followed by your snap pin. Make sure the needle valve, which is this valve right here, that's your pressure release. I'm going to make sure that's completely open. We're going to get our block set back under our jack, and we're going to raise the vehicle back up. From here, we're going to close our needle valve. We're going to use the handle. We're going to pump some pressure in it. You'll notice our continuum is starting to come up. We're going to put all the weight onto the truck, take our block out. From here, we're going to pump our pressure in here until we get our measurement for our wheel wells back to our normal ride height. So with our continuum installed, trailer is completely level. Measure 23 inches from the frame rail in the front, 23 inches frame rail in the back to the ground. I added pressure to my valve, measured my front and rear wheel wells again. My back is about a little bit over an inch off. My front is exactly where it needs to be at 37 inches. The back on newer vehicles, you actually have about 1.5 to 2 inches of play. So if it drops a little bit below your factory measurement, that's okay. It's meant to do that for the braking system on the vehicle. So now that we have it set up, we've already pressurized our system to see where we need to be. I think what I'm going to do is check everything over, and I think I'm going to try and get this pin right here for our cylinder down in this lower hole, give me some more ground clearance. So I'm going to have to relieve the pressure out of it, kind of go back to where we started with getting this put on to get that pin lowered down. Next, last thing we're going to do is we have a small bracket like this in our kit. Take our 2 remaining bolts, slide them in like that. Right here on the jack, leg. Make sure we don't go down too far, but we don't want to go too high. Slide it on like that. And take this bracket, Lay on like this. And then take the last two remaining nuts and thread them into place. What this bracket is for is that when we take the center section off of our ball mount, it helps store it. We'll rest it right on top of this plate and it'll keep it up off the ground. Now we got our PSI, doing it the old-fashioned way, measuring the wheel wells front and back, measuring the frame rail and the trailer front and back to make sure that was level. Now we're going to do it by using the formula that they put on in their instructions to see if we come up with the same amount. Most importantly, out of all the measurements, however you do it, always make sure that the trailer is level, that your front wheel measurement from the ground, the top inside, is as close to exact normal ride height as possible. In the back, you can be within 2 inches. Don't want to go over 2 inches, but you can be within 2 inches. So if it's a little bit less than what your factory measurement was, that's fine. You just want to make sure your front wheel is the same, trailer is as level as possible. Now that we've got everything set up the way we want it to be, it's ready to hit the road. That's going to do it for a look at installation of the B&W Continuum weight distribution on a 2020 F-150 hauling a 2023 East West Alta travel trailer.